Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see all the familiar faces and also a number of new participants to our Visegrad Insight online discussions. Lovely to see you all. And I'm particularly pleased to see the interest in our usually not very influential topics, which is Slovakia, but I can see more and more people are following. And it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Michał Waseczka, who is joining us today for this conversation, but also is the author of an analysis, an op-ed that we published a few days ago, and which you can find on our Visegrad Insight website. This article has been part of our project that we are working on Visegrad countries. But many say Visegrad is dead. We try to find little, moments where some of the topics are connected or are connecting within the four countries. I'm not sure this is the one. It shows more a split and more but we'll try to assess. Let me quickly introduce Michał, who is a PhD in sociology, and his focus is mostly on questions of ethnicity, race, anti-Semitism, but also populism, extremism, which is, of course, interconnected. Michał has been often come to many of our events, a partner in crime in a few projects on behalf of Bratislava Policy Institute, which we, as Visegrad Insight, as Respublika Foundation, are working together. And I want to start with also a quick overview of the thesis that you, Michał, included in your piece, specifically focusing on where Slovakia is on this European map. One, from the point of view of the government and how the Prime Minister is leading European policies, and in what topics are the very the most sensitive ones, but also from this also point of view of people, because Slovakia has a strong European democratic movement, specifically now, very active. So over to you, Michał. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, and thank you for the invitation. Let me mention, just to justify why the person who in the past was working so much on ethnicity, race, anti-Semitism issues is commenting something like this. I'm working on political sociology issues, and mostly in last several years on something what is in common between our institutes, and that's issues of resilience of our societies in new times. And this topic is very much connected to that fact. And let me mention also that speaking about radicalism and extremism, I'm also a member of the hub in Brussels under DG Migration and Internal Affairs at the moment. So we are discussing on, so to say, the highest level how to proceed to stop this fragmentalization of the European Union. Because, let's face it, in European Union 27. In each of these countries, there are significant parts of political elites that are systematically working on fragmentalization of the European Union. They are trying to dissolve the club in various ways. And if you think about it, it's still holding, it's still going on. If there was such a secessionist movement, so to say, in every US state out of all those 50, US would probably cease to exist at the moment, and the European Union is still existing. And we sitting in Slovakia at the moment, we are in a very peculiar situation. We are grappling with democracy and with rule of law. And the whole issue of gas and oil is more part of it than many would like to admit. After all, what is well known in the world is that vast majority of those countries that are very much dependent on oil and gas, or they are producing it, very often they are failing, they are somehow backsliding from democracy. There are just few examples that are, Norway, Canada, that are, still in spite of the fact that they are producing these resources, they are still liberal democracies. In case of Slovakia, of course, I'm not going to repeat my piece because I'm a professor at the university. So the last thing I want to make is that mistake that I wrote several sentences and now I will repeat them. So let's ask this unpleasant question, which drives us crazy, all of us, not only outside of Slovakia, but us Slovaks as well. Why Fico fights so fiercely for the gas from Russia and also from the oil from Russia, and most importantly, for transportation of gas and oil from Russia to Slovakia through, let's say, usual or traditional ways of transportation. Many other countries solved the situation in recent years. Poland, Lithuania, Czech Republic, many others. Slovakia practically didn't touch it. It's basically prolonging the state of arts until 2027. Refinery Slovnaft is repeating every year that the oil that is coming from Russia, full of sulfur, is very different from oil from other countries. We have to adjust to a new technologies, which is fine, which is absolutely fair. The problem is that the refinery is repeating it for years, and they didn't do much about it. And obviously, they are not really planning to do much about it because we don't see much movement. So what's behind it? And let's be quick because of course I'm absolutely sure that the questions will be raised by many. The first thing, and that's probably coming from everybody, certain type of traditionalism. There is always certain type of traditionalism. Let's do business as usual. This is how the oil and gas was transported to Czechoslovakia and Slovakia for decades. We are used to it. It was coming from Russia. We have an infrastructure. And it's used. We are used to it. So psychologically we can buy this argument, but only psychologically. Otherwise, of course, geopolitically and from the business point of view, it's useless even to tackle it. It cannot be important issue. Second is price, and this is dramatically complicated. I'm sociologist. I don't want to ridicule myself in front of people who are well known of peculiarities of gas and oil prices. But what we know, and let's give devil what belongs to devil, Russian oil and Russian gas for Slovakia might be eventually cheaper because it was negotiated in the past. There are negotiations going on for decades, and there are deals that in case of gas are set up until 2035, if I remember, or even 37. So basically, the deals were done years ago. In case of oil, the argumentation is very, very complex, and basically goes this way: the oil is, generally speaking, according to Mr. Fico, cheaper than if it will go through Adria pipeline through Croatia. But of course, those experts who are working in the field are saying, hey, you can make a deal with Croatians and reach the price, which will be very comparable or even cheaper than in case of Russia oil. And on top of it, just to bring you not only emotions, but I would say arguments of the street, so to say. People in Slovakia don't have cheaper gas, don't have cheaper oil. In fact, the gasoline in Slovak gas stations is actually more expensive than, let's say, in Poland. So this is not really the argument. The thirdly, very shortly, and of course we can dig into it, and probably in some questions we will. There is something more important, and that's geopolitical background. Many might say that Robert Fico is playing for the sake of Russia, for the sake of Putin's regime. And we can argue that partly it's true, although we are on the level of speculations. First of all, what we can say, we who are living in Slovakia and who are observing the political career of Robert Fico since the beginning of 90s, he clearly has a sentiment for the Soviet world. He's returning to it. As he's getting older and older, the sentiment for Soviet world is stronger and stronger year by year. So it might be playing certain role here. What is definitely true is his authoritarianism, his admiration for autocracy, which year by year is more and more visible. So, of course, these ties to Putin's regime are almost on a psychological, or I would say social psychological level. Then there are some visible hidden deals with Russia that we don't know much about. We have some guesses, but of course, those are speculations, so we can eventually return to it in a discussion, but I would be very careful here. But let me stop in a fourth part when we speak about geopolitical background. And that's visible belief of Robert Fico that he knows how the recent reshuffle of the world of late modernity will end up. Robert Fico, together with Viktor Orban, are desperately believing that the European Union is finishing, that the project is basically done. Sooner or later, it might last for even decades, but it's basically done. This is the end of the game. The new game of superpowers, United States on one side and China and Russia on the other side, sooner or later will succeed in somehow rebuilding the whole European space and dividing it again into two parts. Fico visibly believes that this is it. So he's planning to suck European Union and European money as much as possible for as long as it will be possible. But generally speaking, he doesn't believe in European project anymore, or he believes in European project that would be influenced and run by cynical Central European politicians who see it only and exclusively as a business cooperation, nothing else. Simply, there is nothing else. So in a long-term perspective, Robert Fico is simply not kicking the ball for the European club, but for other clubs here. And this is probably the most important part. But returning to my piece, and I know that I'm talking too much, so I will try to finalize it. He's visibly, consequently, trying to undermine European Union unity, because he knows that sooner or later, facing the new set up in international affairs. Countries such as Slovakia and Hungary, with their still more and more authoritarian and autocratic governments, will have more and more problems dealing with other partners in the European Union. And he simply, together with Viktor Orban, are undermining unity. But let's go to something what I was writing in my piece. Robert Fico simply is trying to relocate responsibility for unresolved energy pressures from national to supranational level. That's very visible, and he's basically seeking certain rent for his country that will be paid by the European Union sooner or later. But going deeply, and I will, since some people probably had a chance to read my piece, I will leave it. There are several arguments on table, but I will say something very unpleasant here. Watching his activities as far, especially gas business is concerned, he's not only most likely playing for the sake of Slovak oligarchs, but he's basically behaving in the way as he would have some stakes himself in it. So he's basically behaving like a person who eventually is potentially might be benefiting from gas transport from Russia through Ukraine directly to Slovakia. And you know how it is in life. There is one thing that is better than money, and it's a future money, money that will only come in the future. And he's basically behaving as a person who has directly, I mean, he wouldn't be behaving differently. We don't know, it's a speculation, but he's basically behaving almost like a person who is having his personal interest in transportation issues of gas from Russia directly to Slovakia. And bearing in mind various interconnections, especially with the business of Mr. Kretinsky, there are good reasons to think that this is what we see is not only behavior of politician who is thinking, so to say, out of a box in terms of geopolitics. It's not only about authoritarian guy who is undermining unity of the European Union, but most likely it's also the story of a person who has direct interests in the whole business. And let me stop it here. Of course, I would be ready to speak much more about it, but I would be curious about questions and comments of people who are
So,
together with us.
so am I. Thank you for this picture. I'm missing one element, but that's in the second. Um, I just want to make a short reminder about house rules for this for the next 10 minutes. We will be recording and have like an on the record session, but 3:30 we start with an offline session. So the questions will be even more brave, probably, and we can stay even more open there to also dig deeper into those financial benefits and these questions. But I want to ask a little more about this internal issues in Slovakia. Because this is kind of a missing in my view that you mentioned that in the text that also Fico is trying to kind of unpack domestic issues or domestic problems and cover them with unpopular or making European aspect into that, or showing that this is all the fault of the EU in a way, or seeking any other scapegoat for that. What is he trying to cover, and what's the real gain there? Because again, we need to mention that Slovakia is expecting elections, parliamentary elections, right? So it's already in the game or not? How does that look like?
Yeah, I got the question, and you know how it is, Magdalena, with living in some society. Sometimes you take certain things for granted. So let's summarize where Slovakia found itself these days. Elections will be coming in 1.5 years,
Mhm.
and we are definitely not yet in a campaign. But generally speaking,
Poland is. That's
yeah,
why
sure.
I
No,
asked
no, no.
you.
I mean, the thesis of Mr. Fico is that basically campaign before next elections starts in a moment of previous elections. Yeah. So, of course, technicians of power are behaving this way. But seriously, Slovakia is in a really bad mood at the moment. I'm not suggesting that neighboring countries are in fantastic shape, but still, Slovakia is in a really bad mood because unlike in the past when there was there were times when politics, yeah, people were disappointed with politics, but economy was functioning relatively satisfactory. uh, Economy was not functioning satisfactory, but geopolitically Slovakia was a very decent partner of our Western European partners. So there was always, we were always able to find some argument why, the picture, that you have a half empty or half
Mhm.
full glass, and you might have a chance to choose. Now it's difficult to choose. Glass is basically empty. Politically, Slovakia is going through the process of dramatic backsliding from not only liberal democracy, but from rule of law. Slovakia is changing into oligarchic state, semi-mafia state, and I would even say something what Greek philosophers, Polybius, second century before Christ, was describing as ochlocracy. So basically the system which is running by the mob. And that's very much the case of Slovakia these days. So even Robert Fico doesn't have the country under control. So it's even worse that it's not heading only toward authoritarian state, but in fact authoritarian state with a lot of loopholes in governance, I would say. So basically, Slovakia, for the first time in last 36 years, is becoming a rather dysfunctional state, and that's very new. That's very new. Institutions are not basically functioning properly as Slovaks were used just few years ago. And on top of it, after period when Slovakia was probably not the greatest economic tiger of the world, but still doing relatively fine, Slovak economy is falling like a rock. At the moment, it's definitely the slowest in V4, not mentioning the Czech or Hungarian economy are not doing fine as well. But
Mhm.
Slovak economy, that's basically falling down like a rock. So the Robert
The
Fico, to make
inflation
long story
is
short,
very high.
has to cover all the misleading policies that he's producing by targeting, exactly as you said, somebody else. And of course, target is the European Union, European Commission, that is forcing Slovakia to, from his point of view, bizarre things such as Green Deal, etc. And that's why we have such an inflation. That's why we have such an unemployment, which is rising dramatically. That's why foreign investors are leaving the country. That's and you can go on. So of course there is the moment of scapegoating here, definitely, but I would go even further. This is not only about scapegoating. Robert Fico is trying to undermine unity of the European Union with a clear purpose. He wants to bring the chaos that is in Slovakia also to other countries. And this is, by the way, something what we were not paying attention to just years ago, and it's happening in many countries. It looks like to bring a chaos into the country is not a good strategy. You know that sooner or later it will hit also you who is a ruler of the country. But the cases not only of Slovakia, but also of Trump's United States are simply showing that actually to bring a chaos into the country might be a wise strategy if you can utilize it in a very utilitarian, brutal, and I would say very perfid way. And that's exactly what Fico is doing. And in many ways, he wants to see the transformation of that chaos also into other countries.
And do people buy that so far?
One part of society is buying it perfectly. Let's be very much aware of the fact that Slovakia, and I don't want to I want to blackmail here Slovakia, but Slovakia, according to statistics, is the most conspiratory country out of all Central European countries. Very similar to a situation that we see in some of Balkan countries or in Russia. The level is very high also in other Central European countries. Let's give devil what belongs to devil, but in Slovakia it's even higher. Slovakia is relatively anti-Western, not anti-European, not anti-European Union, but anti-Western. Poland is not anti-Western, but it's to a certain extent anti-European Union, but it's definitely not anti-Western, I would say. Slovakia is opposite. Slovakia is relatively and was also very much anti-American, which these days is slightly different than it was 2 or 3 years ago. But Slovakia was always traditionally very, very anti-American, and simply Slovakia is a country that significant parts of its population was perceiving transformation after 1989 as something imposed from above. So now they are buying the arguments of Robert Fico because arguments of Robert Fico are basically fitting exactly into the rhetoric and mental world of communists of pre-1989 period.
Okay, eye-opening. Thank you very much for being so blunt with that. I can see Martin L's question coming. Let's quickly turn on our cameras to make a family photo.